So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to just make some dice and throw them again. So let's go ahead and get our floor first. I'll go ahead and actually what I'm going to do with this, because I keep getting all these subdivisions that we don't need, I'm actually going to go up to Create, Polygon Primitives, Plane, Options, and I am just going to put in 1 for our subdivisions there, and then create my plane. And then I can scale it up. And then I'm going to duplicate this, rotate it 90 degrees in the x-axis, and then just move this, whoops, over to the side. Probably look at it from the side view, it'll be a little bit easier, or from the top. There we go, and just put it right next to that. And then I can lift it up. So I have like a little, I'm going to close up that space. There we go. But we've got a floor and we've got a wall. Now we need to make 2 cubes. And then maybe we'll make them a little bit smaller. Maybe about like that. Oops. Now we've got our 2 dice, and they're a little bit hard to see, so I am just going to put a little shader on them. So I'll make a quick little Lambert, and then in the attribute editor, I will just throw on this bulge pattern, just so we can see it a little bit better. And then I'll just assign that to my cubes. And now you can sort of just see, I mean, it doesn't look like dice, but we can see the cubes a little bit better, and it'll be easier to work with. So I'll lift these up and sort of push them over here to the side. Now, one thing that we have to be careful of is, because what we're going to do is we're going to make these 2 dice active bodies, and then the floor and the wall will be passive bodies. But we have to make sure about where the normals are facing on these surfaces here, because if the normals, whenever you're doing rigid bodies or anything else, you got to make sure that the normals are facing each other. So if I were to have the normals on this sort of facing out that way, then these cubes will come up and not be facing the normals, and they might stick, they might go through. Bad things happen if your normals aren't facing the right way. So let me go ahead and check the normals on my stuff here. I'm just going to go up to Display, Polygons, Face Normals, and that one's pointing up, which is good because that's where we want to bounce. And then on this one, we'll do the same. Face Normals, and see, it's faced the wrong way. It needs to be facing this way. So all I have to do is, I'm going to go back up to Polygons, go to Normals, Reverse, and then the normal will be facing the right way. So now when we bounce this against the wall, it'll bounce back instead of sticking or going through. So now that that's done, let me go ahead really quick and just turn that off now, because that might be distracting later. So we'll just go back up to Polygons, go to Face Normals again, and then so these are going to be passive. So I'll go back to my Dynamics menu set and make them both passive rigid bodies. And then these 2 are going to be active rigid bodies. So we'll go ahead and just do that. And then we'll put some gravity on these, just by selecting both of them and then going up to Fields, Gravity. Now let's test out what it's doing right now. And it's just sort of falling right down. So what we want to do is we want to have it sort of throwing towards the wall and also starting to spin a little bit. So there are a couple of attributes in the channel box. If you go under rigid bodies, there's your usual attributes for your cubes, but then there's all this other stuff that you can mess with. That you can change the initial velocity, which is the initial speed. Right now it's set to 0. If we were to turn it up in the z-axis, So let's even just try 2 and play that. You can see now it starts to go forward a little. Let's change it up to something like 10 and see what happens. Then it's going to start to bounce off of that wall. And this is the kind of thing that we want. Now we also want some spin on these. And so we kind of want these initial spin numbers to be a little bit random, you know. You could also use impulse instead of initial velocity. Let's see what that does. If I take the initial impulse on Z and turn that to 10, because what initial velocity does is it just says it's moving in this direction. Impulse is sort of like it's been thrown. It's movement at the beginning and then it stops. So let's see. Whoa. Yeah, so that's a little bit crazy. So let's go back to, and this is another part of dynamics, is just trying stuff and seeing what happens. So let's go back to this, because this was a little bit more like the kind of thing we're looking for. Let's try to make it a little bit faster, maybe 15. Okay. And then we'll make that one 13, just a little bit slower, just so we're starting to get a little bit of randomness happening. And then we'll just start putting in numbers for our initial velocity, or our initial spins, because this is just going to spin it around each of these axes. So we'll put in 2 and 5 and 7. And then this one, let's do 4 and 3 and 9. And let's see what that does. So that's a little bit better. I mean, the spin doesn't happen until later, but we get some nice spin happening there. All right. So let's also, because we kind of want them, let's see if we can get this to sort of run into this one a little bit. So let's take this initial velocity x and turn it up to 2 and see what happens. There we go. Now this is going to fall down. So maybe, let's see. Maybe we can just make this floor a little wider and the wall. Oops. Oops. Zoomed clear away from everything, haven't I? All right, here we go. Now then, let's select our passive rigid bodies and let's widen them out. And now let's see what happens. All right, so you can play with this. See what you can make happen with this. You can do spin impulse. That might help on the beginning spin. And just play with these settings. See what you can make happen here. You've got bounciness. That's going to make it sort of be more bouncy as it hits the walls. Or actually, I've got the wall selected, so the bounciness, it'll bounce things off easier. So, and then there's damping, which is going to sort of take down whatever the effects of the bounciness is, and there's all kinds of friction. You can actually turn active on and off so that you can have something that's a passive rigid body, and then you can turn it active and keyframe that even if you want to. So there's a lot of things to play with in there. So go ahead and just mess with this, and then when you get something you like, bake your keyframes and do a play blast and save it in the movies folder of your dynamics project, and then turn it in. Thanks. Bye.